knowing whether or not your child wants to join your business is a great thing to figure out pretty early. It's
Right.
often a big disconnect that I see, and it's sometimes a tricky one to work around.
One of the probing questions that we often get is, when's the right time to start thinking about succession in my business?
Yeah.
Get it all the time. And I mean, the annoying and best answer is, when you open your business, be thinking about your succession ideas. And not just succession, but just more broadly. And maybe this is more palatable to entrepreneurs. Like, think about, what is your exit strategy for this business? Succession could be part of that, or it could be the entirety of it. But really, at the outset, or as early as possible, be thinking about what your goals are through this vehicle that is the business. Because often, as people age, the business becomes the mechanism through which they're going to accomplish their life goals. Most of our clients, if to the point that they become high net worth and are getting into more complex structuring on the trust side of things, the reason they got there and the vehicle for them getting there is often a business interest.
Yep.
So when that becomes their primary asset, and now they're trying to structure they're looking at their kids and they're trying to structure their future, it factors in centrally to that picture. So the earlier that they think about how that's all going to work out in the end, even if it's just a general conversation, it helps kind of direct their steps through the stages of the development of a business.
Yeah. And to sort of give an example to that, I had a client who passed fairly quickly without really thinking about. He was a practitioner of sorts. He had a business in which his expertise was a large portion of the valuation of it. And then he also had a book of business that went with it. And he passed quickly. He was in the process of selling the business when he passed. He did not complete the transaction before he passed. And as a result, after his passing, the valuation dropped by 60%, I would say. And then the sale itself, negotiating that on behalf of the family, they had almost no leverage to work with. There was nothing we could really do other than read the terms, explain to them how they weren't great terms, and say there's not a lot we can do right now because we have no leverage. You need to get this out of the estate. Otherwise, it's only going to become worth even less. And so that's why it's so important. Think about it right away.
Yeah. Really, the earlier the better. We had someone in recently who is a contemporary of ours, if we're considered contemporaries. I've got Matt by about 40 years or so.
Listening music-wise, yeah.
My Spotify age is like 68 years old. Matt's is 12, I think.
Okay.
But in any event, this person came in, contemporary. He's done really well, been successful in his businesses, and he's looking at his kids who are preteen and thinking about how he wants to include them in the plan. And it's great because he's already thinking about what's going to happen 10 or 15 years down the road when they are entering the workforce. Are they going to join our company or companies, or are they going to want to do something completely different? And he's already considering those questions, which puts him in a position to make those decisions properly as they come. It could be that he's leaving the opportunity open to them to join the business, or it could be that it's you want to put your kids in the best position to be successful, but maybe they want to do what they want to do, and he just wants to give them the financial wherewithal to achieve that.
Yeah.
And it changes how he approaches his business as a result.
Absolutely. And honestly, having conversations with your kids before you get to us about what they want to do is always helpful. We're happy to help facilitate those conversations. It's actually a large part of our job, but knowing whether or not your child wants to join your business is a great thing to figure out pretty early. It's often a big disconnect that I see, and it's sometimes a tricky one to work around. If your family business isn't something brought up with your children and you're not having conversations with them directly about, do they even like it? Like, do you like what we do? Do you like that we sell X, or do you like that we provide this service? You're not going to know if they have any interest in joining your business. And knowing the answer to that question is crucial to providing us with information we need to help you. And if you don't know that answer, then 10 years down the road, you're basically going to be looking at a outdated business model, and you're not going to know who to leave it to or how to even exit it because it's kind of outdated and it's hard to sell. So having those conversations like you were going to about family values, about things that are important to you, figuring out what's important to your children is important anyway, but it's also important for your legal purposes and your financial purposes. So
yeah, I mean, I think the most successful transitions from one generation to the next in terms of operating a business happen with an overlap, a significant overlap.
as we have here.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You want the next generation to prove that they're capable and interested and willing to do this, before you hand over the reins.
Yeah.
And if there are, most people who build businesses have great peers who are operators who join them in the development of the business, even if they're not necessarily an ownership interest. Those partners can run a business in your place, but and then when your next generation comes up, there's a little bit of friction sometimes, but there's overlap, and then the next generation can learn, and you've opened up both options to yourself. If the next generation's not interested, then you have your existing management group that's done a good job that they might be interested. And if the next generation is interested, then they've learned to work together with the management group, and they can grow. So in the corporate world, there are ways to distinguish between economic interests, where you have a profits interest in the business, and voting or operating interests, where you actually can control the ongoing operation of the business. So often we can distinguish between these two, particularly if it's an LLC. That's easy. In an S corp, you're only permitted to one class of stock, so it's a little more complex. But there's usually a way to allow uninterested children to still maintain a profits interest in the operation of a business, while interested children can have a day-to-day role in the future of the business.
There are other assets in the estate. Just basically give them interest in those assets, and then give the child who's working the business interests, which is easier said than done, but it is doable. But again, it's something you got to decide before you pass, because if you pass and you haven't thought that much through any of this, odds are it says to my children equally on everything. And then you wind up with children wanting different shares. What we can do from an estate planning point of view is we can actually have certain children disclaim certain assets, which is a mechanism we have after the fact. So I would have, let's say there are 3 children. Children A works for the business. Children's B and C don't work for the business. You could have children's B and C disclaim any interest in the business asset, and then child A disclaim any interest in the Rev Trust. And so hopefully that would balance out. But odds are that's not actually equal, which is why it's so important to come and see us, because no one wants to get less than their fair share.
We have access to our client for hours at a time.
Yeah.
Handful of hours.
It's not a lot.
It's not a lot. Whereas the principal of a business and their family have weeks, months, years together where they can have these discussions. So, if you're weighing, how much of a role an attorney can play in making sure everybody's comfortable versus how much of a role a parent can play in making sure their children are comfortable, you can't compare these things. In my own case, for instance, this is not directly related, but as I was growing up, my parents were clear that getting into the best college you can get into is the goal. You turn 17, 18, get into the best one you can. In my case, I'm grateful. I was fortunate. Financial considerations weren't involved in that discussion. They were not satisfied with the results of my college application process at all. And their suggestion was take another year, try again next year. And they came up with...
To be fair, you were like 16?
I was young.
Yeah.
They came up with a plan of how I was going to spend the interim year, and it would have strengthened my college application, and this is what they wanted me to do. I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to spend another year. And on the financial side of things, I actually had a lot of support from the university that I ended up going to, and I wanted to go. Okay, so it wasn't the school they expected me to get into. Great. I went. Their advice at 18 or 17 or 16 or whatever year you want to tell me it was, I don't remember.
I was 18. I feel like you were 16.
Their advice was go take a year and basically waste it, in my view, only to strengthen your college application process. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. You've been inculcating in me a value of getting into the best school I could, and that's the value that you passed, through this process. That's what you wanted from me. I applied. The chips fell where they fell, and this is what we're doing now. I'm not going to go take a year just because you want me to. Is where whether that was wise or unwise, another question. I'm thrilled to be where I am right now. So let's just put a period on that. But in any event, I think when you're talking to your own kids about the future, the values are what are going to come through. And it's hard to pivot after 30 or 40 years of a certain style of education of your kids and say, well, actually, it's this now. So I really think the key thing is to be open and honest with them throughout the process as they're aging into the workforce and they're developing their families and they're what are your expectations and what should theirs be for the ultimate succession or exit of a business interest. What I've seen in the business world in general that I really like is when you have the next generation get their education and then they go spend a few years in another business or even in another field to understand what it is to be an employee and kind of work their way up a little bit and get a different view on their industry or just the nature of business before they step into the family business. They've gained a little bit of experience, they have a little bit of a perspective to offer, and now they can bring that experience to bear internal to their business and be, to Matt's point, a little bit of an agent of change, of a new generation that you want them to bring a more modern view. You want them to bring some external expertise. If you were going to hire someone from outside, you'd want that also. It's a blend of experience internal to your business and an intimate understanding of the business, but also experience from outside where you have other perspectives that you can offer.
Yeah, I agree. You should inherit an economic interest. You shouldn't necessarily inherit a managerial interest. That should be earned. I think that's the best advice we can give and the best way to approach it moving forward. So you might have a child who gets your share of your business interest when you pass, but he shouldn't be in charge of it unless he's learned the market, the field, and he knows what he's doing. So you need these in-betweens, basically.
And I mean, if you're running a successful business, it's likely with the support of a talented staff that stays in place and helps the transition to the next generation's ownership group.